This is the continuation of pollination and fertilization. We have already completed what is pollination, self and cross pollination. Now we are going to read the agents of cross pollination. Now there are different agents of cross pollination, as you see in the picture. Entomophily. Entomophily means the pollination carried by insects is called as entomophily. You can see the picture. The insects are sitting on the flowers. So they collect the pollen grains from one flower to another flower, as their body is sticky, feathery, hairy, etc. Now let's see. Such flowers which are pollinated by insects are called entomophilous flowers. Now what are the characteristics of these flowers? The flowers are large, brightly colored. The flowers are scented to attract insects for pollination. The pollen grains are sticky or they have spines so that they can get easily attached to the body of the insects, and the insects can carry these pollen grains from one flower to the other. Next, anemophily. If the pollination is carried by wind, wind is an agent of carrying these pollen grains. Now, if it is carried by wind, pollen grains are carried by wind, it is called anemophily, as in maize, palm, wheat, etc. Such sort of plants you can find this type of pollination. The characteristics of these flowers: the flowers are small, they need not be brightly colored, they are small, they need not produce scent or nectar, they are often dull in color, but their anthers produce large number of pollen grains, because during the pollination, as the wind is the agent, a lot of pollen grains are wasted as when they are transferred from the anther to the stigma. The pollen grains are light, dry, small and smooth, so that they can be easily carried by wind. The next type of pollinating agent is hydrophilic, which you can see in water plants like Welsonaria, hydrilla. You can find this type of pollination. Mostly aquatic plants which are submerged. Now, the flowers are small, inconspicuous. Pollen grains here also they are produced in large numbers, as in case of wind pollination. Pollen grains are lighter, they float on surface of water. In Welsonaria, the male flower gets detached from the parent plant and floats on the surface of water till fertilization. That means they are carried up to the female flowers. The next type of pollinating agent is animal. Other than insects, animals, we call it as zoophily, and like birds, squirrels. Here you can see we call it as ornithophily if it is pollinated by birds. The flower, kanna flower, is pollinated by birds, small bird. We call this bird as hummingbird. The flowers are often large, brightly colored, so that they are attracted by these insects. Birds. The petals are fused to form tubes that holds the nectar. The length of the tube is often corresponding to the length of the beak of the bird. The flowers have usually projecting stamen and stigmas are ridge. The next type of pollination is by pollination carried by bats, which is called as Chiropterophily. Now mostly you find these plants in the tropical regions. Bat can suck the nectar, they can chew the pollen, they feed on insects found on these flowers. So these flowers are large, they have large pedicels. and the flowers are large amount, they produce large amount of nectar pollinated by bats. Next topic is fertilization. Fertilization is the fusion of a male gamete with a female gamete to form a zygote. In all flowering plants, the female gametophyte is situated deep within the ovary, away from the stigma. Partially, they develop male gametes. Male gametophytes, pollen grains, are deposited on the stigma during pollination. So, these male gametes are carried up to the ovary to fuse with the female gamete. So, the fusion of a male gamete with a female gamete is called fertilization. Now, there are some steps in fertilization. First, germination of the pollen grain. Each pollen grain is received by the stigma. Which is received by the stigma? First, germinates. That means each pollen grain has a double wall. The outer wall called as the wall is called as the intine. Now, the pollen grain, the exine splits, the intine protrudes out. This intine carries two nucleus. One is tube nucleus, other one is generative nucleus, and thus as it protrudes out, it carries these male gametes along with it. Now, second is the entry of pollen tube into the ovule. You can see the pollen tube is entering the ovule. Now, when it enters the ovule, it carries generative nucleus. Then entry of pollen tube into the embryo sac. When it enters into the ovule, the pollen tube reaches the embryo sac. This is the internal region. This is called as embryo sac, containing polar nucleus, synergids, etc. Then here the male gametes, which are carried by the pollen tube, they enter into this embryo sac, where fusion of male and female gamete occurs. Now, what is this double fertilization or triple fusion? After the discharge of two male gametes from the pollen tube, one nucleus fuses with the egg cell to produce a zygote or the oospore, which we call it as syngamy. The second male gamete fuses with the secondary nucleus to form endosperm nucleus. One is zygote, other one is endosperm nucleus. Endosperm nucleus produces food for the growing zygote. Since the secondary nucleus is already a product of the fusion of two polar nucleus before fertilization, this fusion is called triple fusion. Two male nuclei with one female nucleus is called triple fusion. As the male gametes participate in fertilization, we call it as double fertilization. As the fertilization is taking place twice, one male nucleus is fusing with the egg cell to produce zygote, another male nucleus with the endosperm to form endosperm nucleus, secondary nucleus to form endosperm nucleus. As the fertilization is taking place twice, we call it as double fertilization. Okay, we end up this chapter. Thank you for watching.